Under the same sun, we laugh, we run. Our world, our home, we share the air. Let's care for it, show we care. Under the same sun, let's show we care. Let's show we care.
Under the Same Sun. Hello and welcome. This is Under the Same Sun, and I am Lois Apasambo. This is a space where we pause, reflect, and have honest conversations about the issues shaping our world and our environment. This is part 2 of our episode, The Air We Don't See. If you joined us last week, you already know that we began talking about greenhouse emissions and how they are quietly but deeply affecting our everyday lives. I am still joined by Enebi Opalua, who is the team lead, Natural Resource and Climate Governance at Budget Foundation. Well, today we will be starting with our climate story of the week.
Climate story of the week.
So we have this climate story of the week, right? And this story is just to help us contextualize so people are able to understand. So this story is about Aisha.
Okay.
Aisha wakes up early every morning before the sun comes out. And like many women, her day starts in the kitchen. She lights firewood, she puts the pot on, and she begins to cook for her family. The smoke fills the small space, but she is used to it. It has always been part of her daily life. And for a very long time, she never saw it as a problem. Then one day she started coughing. At first, it didn't seem serious, just a small cough that came and went. She thought maybe it was dust or it was just a change of weather, so she ignored it. But the cough did not stop. It started coming more often, especially in the morning when she was cooking. Then she began to feel tired all the time. Even after resting, she still felt weak. She also started having headaches. One afternoon while she was cooking, she suddenly felt a tightness in her chest. It was hard to breathe. She quickly stepped outside and sat down, trying to catch her breath. Her neighbor saw her and became worried. She said, "Aisha, you need to go to the hospital." At the clinic, the doctor asked her a few questions. Do you cook with firewood or with charcoal? Is your kitchen closed or open? Are you around smoke every day? Aisha said yes. The doctor explained that the smoke from firewood and charcoal is not just smoke. It carries tiny particles and gases that cannot be seen. So when people breathe it in every day, it can affect their lungs and make it harder to breathe. He also told her something else. It's not only the smoke from cooking. The air around is generally changing because of greenhouse gases, and the world is getting hotter, and the air is becoming heavier and more polluted. These things, combined with Aisha's smoke, make health problems worse. Aisha was quiet as she listened, because to her, she was just living her normal life, especially because from her grandmother to her mom, she saw them live these lives and they were normal. But now she realized that the air around her was affecting her health. As she sat in the clinic, she looked around. There was a small child struggling to breathe. There was an older man coughing again and again. And there was a young girl complaining about chest pain. Different people, different problems. Seems like different problems, but they were all connected. The air they were breathing was the issue. Aisha went home with some medicine, but she also went home thinking differently. Now, sometimes she steps outside while cooking to get fresh air. Sometimes she opens the door to let the smoke out because she understands something she did not know before. You may not think about it, but the air around us matters. And sometimes the things we cannot see are the ones that are affecting us the most. And so this Aisha story now even speaks somehow more directly to how something close to us, like the smoke that you breathe directly, and that's the one that she can actually see is actually affecting us. And so for her, one of the mistakes that she made, and is also a mistake that we all make, is maybe our parents lived this same kind of life that we're living. What was wrong with them? Nothing happened to them. So why is it now happening differently in our own generation? Abi, is it that they will still say women of nowadays are not are not strong enough, So those are some of the issues that make people think that climate change is an absurd or bizarre thing because, for the past 2 generations, nothing happened. Why is it so different in our generation? So The one question I would have, right, from Aisha's story is, what is it that people do not believe, or what is that thing that people do not know that they need to know about climate change?
We can't be ignorant anymore. Aisha's case, sadly, is not isolated. Many Nigerians, especially women, suffer from this kind of exposures, especially people that use firewood to cook. And not just firewood, people that use charcoal. Right. You know, when charcoal is burning well. When there's incomplete combustion, that's one that you're seeing smoke.
Yes.
Then there's one that is burning. You can't see smoke. You can only see fire.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean there's no smoke. The difference is that the one that you can't see the smoke is releasing CO2. The one that is releasing smoke is releasing things like CO, carbon monoxide, which is much more poisonous because the combustion is not complete. Because the oxygen it is burning is insufficient, or the kind of fuel it is burning has an issue. But they are all still carbon, in quote, carbon emissions. Now, what should people know? You need to understand the choices available and weigh your choices very well. It is easy to say because for those of us who have choices, but for some people, they don't have so many alternatives. Let me explain. For those of us who live in urban areas or who live a certain standard of living, we can choose to switch our choice of cooking fuel from firewood or from kerosene to cleaner sources like gas or electric cookers, if you can afford it, because you have the choice.
Yeah.
Your standard of living and level of economic living affords you that choice. That's one. Your location in an urban area gives you available alternatives because urban centers have more of these resources. So you can find a gas cooking, a LPG, liquefied petroleum gas tanks and refilling centers in urban areas better than rural areas. You can have a choice. But for someone like Aisha, who maybe lives in rural part of Nigeria, first of all, we don't know the quality of the roads that leads to her village. All right. So this is where public policy and government comes in. Just by that alone, her community is cut off from access to many things. Choice of cleaner fuels to even infrastructure, or even good water supply, or even electricity supply. Not even to cook yet, to even light the bulb.
Yeah.
That is one. And then that is just because of poor road. In terms of access to information, we don't know the education level or the level of public awareness that gets to these people. So they are not aware of the dangers that they are exposed to. You know, when something comes from a professional or comes from the government, it hits differently than when someone like your fellow market woman, yeah, this one I brought gossip again. You understand? Now, this is just putting a scenario, right? So, because of her location, education level, maybe her agenda as well, she already has limited options on alternatives of options. And so, telling someone like her to switch from something that is the only option she has becomes more difficult when it comes to implementing public policy. Sometimes you're only left to manage, and that's what the doctor told her. Cook better in ventilated.
Open the window.
Open the windows. Don't let it get concentrated. And it's quite sad, but sometimes that is the option available to people in that category. And so shifting their condition, changing their condition, cannot be done without external intervention or external support. So one, people need to be aware. There need to be interventions or specific awareness to educate people around the hazards, the dangers of some of these habits that they've been using and they've been doing for generations. Yes. The doctor said that it's a mixture of our cooking fuel and the environment. Even the food she's eating now is probably not as healthy as it was 100 or 200 years ago when our ancestors were cooking with, with
Firewood and it felt
firewood.
okay.
In fact, our ancestors probably were not using aluminium or plastic plates. They were using clay plates. We don't know how that has affected their natural disposition. We don't know the amount of herbs they drank every day that helped them to fight off or to rejuvenate. You know, today we call it detoxify. Let me want detoxify, want to detox. Detox. But there were natural systems, natural options that our ancestors had that helped in cleansing the body, both internally and externally, even though the level of health care then was poor or not as good as now, where we have better health care that now reduces in some areas, child mortality and the rest. Things are a bit better compared to 20 years. But in terms of their farming, quality of vegetables, the kind of food intake they had, it was different. There were no cars polluting the atmosphere with exhaust fumes. That's another layer. If you live, depending on where you live, if you live in the south, there was no soot from gas flaring. There was no methane poisoning. Methane poisoning is even worse than CO2 or gas flaring because methane is just like venting, just releasing that gas into the air. And too much of that gas can cause methane poisoning that can cause death and even nervous damage as well. Causes respiratory disease, causes sight defects. So there are certain factors that contribute to all of this. And that is why, one, be aware of your situation, get awareness. That one helps, but a lot still falls on public policy, what the government needs to do. So, for example, if I were to talk about the emissions from vehicle emissions, there are emission standards that are being implemented in several, even Nigeria has emission standards that determines the quality of petrol that should enter the country. If you recall, some months back, there was an argument between Dangote and
the regulatory
that they said his diesel-based petrol was not pure enough. And it's okay, let's come and measure. This one measure, that one measure. Whoever was wrong or whoever was right is not what we are talking about today. But that should mean that there are certain emission standards that if they are not enforced or maintained, the exhaust fume that comes out from your car is much more dangerous. Apart from the fact that it will damage your vehicle, the exhaust fumes produce gases that are much more dangerous to human beings. We were taught in school that we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. But they didn't tell us, or they did not emphasize that as the oxygen is entering your nose, nitrogen is entering, sulfur is entering, CO2 is entering. Basically,
every gas
21% of the air you breathe in is what you use. Because the atmosphere is made of 21% oxygen. So every inhale, anytime you breathe in, you are breathing in more nitrogen than you are breathing oxygen. Because nitrogen is about 70%. Yes. So when there are other pollutants in the atmosphere, you take in everything. And the first thing that goes, your respiratory tract and then your lungs. The more you breathe all of these things, the more it's just like dust fumes. You know, if there's summertime, you open your window, you just see small dust fumes. Like sometimes you don't notice it. You just see small. If you come like after 2 weeks, you notice that there's a thick layer of dust. It's gradually you start have those layers of dust, and then suddenly you start coughing. That is the body's way of trying to expel the dirt that has entered your system.
Yeah.
And then you have catarrh and you have mucus coming out of your mouth. Your body is trying to self-clean. It's trying to remove the pollutants that have entered. But the more you are exposed to this environment, the more poisoning you get in your system. People now are not exposed to respiratory trachea disorders, lung cancer. If it depends on where you live, people that are in oil producing regions are much more vulnerable to some of these illnesses and risks as well. So what people should know, I've mentioned that, but I think a lot lies in policy where you enforce standards, ensure that we have emission standards. And if apart from the health imperatives about this, it's even becoming much more crucial for Nigeria to start maintaining emission standards, because the fuel that we are producing that we are exporting. Our destination markets in Europe, which accounts for the major part of our exports, have
Very
enforced
strict about
standards
it.
that from 2027, if your emission standards are above their threshold, they won't buy your oil or your gas anymore. So if we don't enforce those strict emission standards in our oil and gas sector, we are losing,
National economy
is at risk.
yes.
So even if for the sake of your people, we ignore some of these things,
At least for the sake
at least
of
for the sake of
economy.
revenue, if maybe that is what we pinch you, do something about. But be that as it may, we need to enforce standards that ensure that our air is clean, vehicular standards. When some years back, when President Obasanjo wanted to ban vehicles above a certain age from entering the country, people were shouting. Now, his own may have been at that point maybe extreme, maybe not extreme. That is not the
Bone
issue
of
now.
contention.
But the thing now is that you need to have vehicular standards, both used vehicles in your country or maintenance standards that ensure that your vehicles are not polluting. Because if you enforce standards on your petrol, on your fuel, and you bring in clean fuels for now, at least for now, because very soon those will be phased
Electric
out.
cars are actually.
So if you bring in
drifting
clean fuels for now, you put it in a defaultive, in a bad vehicle that has a bad engine. The engine will burn clean fuel and still produce black smoke. So we have a lot of vehicles on the road that are producing soot, producing black smoke that a lot of us just ignore. We have law enforcement agencies that are in checkpoints where these trailers and vehicles and downfall buses will drive past, blurring smoke out, and they don't do anything.
Even collected.
Some VIO officers would allow a commercial vehicle that is polluting the atmosphere pass by and come and ask
Their
you,
own cars.
your vehicle does not show any sign of defect, you come and start asking you for your papers. But the taxi cab that even from the site is not looking good is allowed to pass. So we need to adjust our approach to enforcing public policy, enforcing regulations, because that is what we need to protect ourselves. There are certain health and environmental gains that we can get from just enforcing existing regulations and, if necessary, improving regulations that we have. But let us at least first start enforcing regulations that we already have.
So quickly, and this will be the last question, and hopefully it shouldn't take so long. The contention about planting trees and how this is supposed to help with the climate change issue, right? And so many people are saying, oh, it's not just about planting trees, but they're saying trees actually help to absorb, most especially carbon dioxide. What's your take on that?
It's a good initiative. So trees are natural carbon sinks. Carbon sinks means these are natural, God-given for trees that they now convert, because trees take carbon dioxide and release oxygen.
Yes.
So because of that, if you have more trees, then you have the chance of taking out more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and releasing more oxygen. Because of anthropological activities, basically human activities, that we have now more buildings, more roads, more bridges. We cut down a lot of our plants, a lot of our trees to make room for urbanization, for housing, for roads. We need it as a people. But there are some places, I think there's a principle that says if you cut down one tree, you plant two more. So we need to replace these carbon sinks. And there's nothing that says that trees cannot exist side by side urban development. And that's where urban and regional planning comes in. Right? That's why if you see, when former minister, who is former governor of the Kaduna, El-Rufai, when he was minister of FCT, you will see when he said, God, they come to demolish some buildings where they say this is a green zone.
Yes, just so that there is green.
So it's part of urban planning to ensure that there is green vegetation with urbanization, and it is deliberate, because if you have more of those green, it helps the urban climate, the urban climate, the climate around the urban areas, where to help have more better air. You notice that if you are traveling by road and let's say you're traveling from Lagos, the moment you cross that Mowe Redeem Camp axis, the temperature drops. The environmental temperature drops, especially if it's around towards the end of the around Harmattan period. When you drive out of Lagos, you just cross that Mowe Bafo Redeem Camp axis. Just cross that place into Ogun State. The temperature of the air drops because you've left a heavily urbanized environment to an environment where you have more trees and more vegetation. It's natural. So by the time you take away all the trees and all the plants, there are several accidental effects from heat to atmospheric quality and the rest. So planting trees helps. Another thing is even avoid even cutting down the trees if you can do that. Yeah, I mean, if you can avoid, that's why there are some parts of Nigeria where because of desertification, they don't allow cutting down of trees. So they rather you plant trees. That's what afforestation comes about. Planting trees helps, is a carbon sink, but that's not the only alternative. I think sometime last year or 2 years ago, I found out that sea plants, so that plants in shallow rivers and swamps, they actually contribute more to the air, to oxygen, than trees than the forest on land.
Yeah.
They provide more oxygen. So that's why our coral reefs are important. Aquatic life and aquatic habitats are important to be preserved so that the overall balance is maintained. Tree planting is a good initiative. It helps to restore carbon sinks that may be lost. But I think better says let's even avoid losing them. And this is a case in point. We have a new refinery coming up in Nigeria, in Akwa Ibom. I don't want to, I've mentioned the state already, so you already know who's building it.
Yeah.
But you see, there's a movement to either relocate the site of the refinery or maybe avoid certain areas, because the land that was given for the construction of the refinery contains some endangered species, some plants that are, South of Akwa has a lot of biodiversity.
Yeah.
And I think that piece of that area has been previously marked for preservation. So I'm not so versatile with the details. But there is a campaign like, no, we can't lose this ecological asset. Apart from the environmental gains, it's also a heritage. And this is a state where they've also suffered the introduction of invasive species of plants among their ways. So there is, because of their mangroves are being threatened because of certain plants that during the colonial era, the white people brought that plant to help prevent erosion. So that plant was able to hold the soil together and prevented soil erosion from the rivers and the seas. But eventually it became an invasive species that was now wiping out the mangroves. It had an advantage, but also now had a disadvantage. And so the mangroves are being threatened. So instead of losing the plants, the trees in the first place, what policies or what decisions can be made to ensure that we don't lose them at all. Let alone,
rather than cut and have to plant again.
If you want to replace a tree, it doesn't grow overnight.
It takes 20 years.
It takes, So imagine trying to replace a forest. And in 20 years, if you don't have all air to breathe, you
will not reach the 20 years.
So I think, yes, tree plantings are good initiatives. In fact, biodiversity restoration generally, is something that is being pushed as a way to reduce climate change, because it's a mitigating action, because it reduces the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and then also improves the quality of the environment as well.
Thank you very much, Enebe. And this is just for the audience. If you have thought that climate change is, a very abstract thing out there, you have seen stories like that of Aisha, and even examples that Enebe has given us to show you how real it is to us. And it is now also left to us as individuals, in addition to what government is doing, to ensure that, some of these trees, we don't have to cut them down, and also ensure that we plant as many trees as possible. And for government, please all the policies that need to be in place should be put in place so we're able to conserve our forests. Before we wrap up the program, here are 3 green steps you can take this week. Use cleaner cooking options when possible. If you can, switch to gas, electric stoves, or improve cook stoves that produce less smoke. Avoid burning waste. Burning trash releases harmful gases into the air. Find safer ways to dispose of waste where possible. Plant and protect trees around your home. Trees help clean the air and provide shade, which can reduce heat around your environment. We may not see the air, but every small step we take can make it cleaner, safer, and healthier for all of us under the same sun. Thank you really for staying with us through this 2-part series. It has been a thoughtful journey, and I hope something in it lingers with you. Join us again, same time next week for a fresh episode of Under the Same Sun. I remain your host, Lois Apasambo.
Under the same sun, we laugh, we run. Our world, our home, we share the air. Let's care for it, show we care. Under the same sun, let's show we care. Let's show we care.
A generator. You can't sleep at night. You can't close your window because of the heat. There's no light to put on the fan.
It's an endless cycle. It is an endless cycle.
It's quite a very uncomfortable situation. And the problem is that the forecast is not really also now. If things don't change, we run the risk of having 3 to 20 times of droughts between now and I think 2050. Between now and 2080, I think 20 more people will die from heat stroke on a normal basis.
We are almost out of time for today, so we'll pause here and continue with the second part next week. Before we wrap up the program, here are 3 green steps you can take this week. Use cleaner cooking options when possible. If you can, switch to gas, electric stoves, or improve cook stoves that produce less smoke. Avoid burning waste. Burning trash releases harmful gases into the air. Find safer ways to dispose of waste where possible. Plant and protect trees around your home. Trees help clean the air and provide shade, which can reduce heat around your environment. We may not see the air, but every small step we take can make it cleaner, safer, and healthier for all of us under the same sun. Well, that is that for the episode today. Please join us again because there's still a lot more and it only gets more interesting from here.
Under the same sun.